Good morning, listeners. My name is Christian.
My name is Josiah.
And my name is Micha, and welcome to the Morning Ponderings podcast.
A podcast where we explore the limits of our knowledge and understanding to assess the possibilities allotted to us by them. Yeah.
And
Limited understanding and I thought that I knew the rest of it. I'm sorry. Micha,
empathy for others or something.
Yeah.
So that can flourish.
Flourishing empathy.
Yes. Yeah. Hey, listeners, guess what? We are veering away from religion. Like this episode. I don't know about next episode. I might veer back. But this episode, we're talking about something else. I mean, I know we've had a couple of episodes like that, but maybe there might be some overlap. But we're talking about
doubtful.
War.
Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome, listeners, to a weird time in history where everybody's collectively holding their breath to see who has the audacity to start World War III and possibly an extinction level event. So, we're here to talk about
okay.
what could possibly happen in the future, and hopefully won't.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a little different turn than I thought we were going, but hey, that's a good thing to talk about. I'm curious to know what you're thinking, Christian, because my mind has not been thinking that we're gonna have a World War III anytime soon.
Oh, I don't know. Have you been
He's
paying
talking
attention
about
to the
what's
news?
going on with
No.
Russia right now.
Oh my goodness,
okay.
Josiah. Oh my goodness, Micha. Do we have some news for you?
Oh boy, this is
Ready
gonna be
for
fun.
new levels of stress?
No, not. I don't need more of that.
But before we jump into that craziness, how goes it? How goes the life and all the things? And it looks like you moved into your kitchen.
Yeah. Yeah, life still has just been a whirlwind. It's been crazy, but oh man, gotta wake up. So yeah, we finally got our kitchen in and finally got the cabinets and the countertops. So I think 2 weeks ago or whenever we last talked, we only had cabinets and we got countertops this week, which was awesome, and it looks amazing in there. But now we're like, oh man, it just would look so much better with tile, like the backsplash being tiled. And so
Time to get into the nitty gritty.
well, we don't have much to tile, and so once we regain some of our funds we just spent on the cabinets, we might just pay somebody because it won't be that expensive because it's pretty small. Like it's not like small, but the area to tile is pretty small.
Gotcha.
So,
well, best of luck with that.
Yeah, and if you will also see behind me,
There's
but
a piano,
there is a piano. Yeah, obviously
but also
the
the
listeners.
soundboards are gone.
Yeah, I need to put them up in a different kind of formation because they would be behind the piano. And that's not
Ideal.
and not ideal because then the piano
Efficient.
would be sticking out from the wall quite a bit. So I might have to like kind of put them long ways. But getting that here was very stressful. But also I'm like really, really excited. Basically, this is a kind of a funny story. I'm gonna make a TikTok about it, but here's a little story on what happened. So I originally was going to rent a trailer, just like a decent sized trailer, from U-Haul so that I could just tow it behind my truck, right? Now I have a truck. But as I was like doing some research, I was getting nervous about the whole weight distribution thing because I didn't know where I would strap it, and I didn't want to strap it all the way to the front because that can be slightly dangerous to have that much weight right on the ball. And then I didn't want to strap it to the side because then it'd be weirdly like there's nothing else I was putting in that trailer. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to rent the smallest U-Haul. I'm going to play it safe. I don't want to risk my life or the piano. So just rent the smallest U-Haul. So I get there and it's like a 10-foot. It's like, just a little U-Haul. And they're like, hey, so part of this is I had to then drag my little Nissan Altima behind the truck because, I had to drive there, but I also had to get that car back. because it was on a Thursday. My wife's working. So I get there and they're like, yeah, our tow dolly doesn't have working lights, so we'll have to send you to a different U-Haul to get that. And I'm like, okay. So I drive 10 minutes, get that, drive back so I can get my car on. And I'm talking with the guy and looking at the back, and I'm like, where's the ramp on this thing? He's like, oh, they don't have ramps. Only the 15 footers and above have ramps. So I get back to the first place. I'm like, hey, I need a bigger U-Haul. I need a ramp. Like, I'm not getting this piano off. I'm not carrying it off. That's for sure. So do you have one for me? They are like, not really. And so they like kind of call around and they're like, well, we have one, but it's a 26-foot truck. It's the biggest U-Haul they have. And they were like, well, we'll let you have it for the same price. And I was like, well, I guess that's as best I can do. So I get this little upright piano in a 26-foot truck, and that is the only thing in the back.
Oh my gosh.
And that was just, I mean, that thing was huge. Turning it around was an awful process because you can't back up when you have a car hooked to the back. And so once I got the piano on, was having to like turn around in my parents' neighborhood in the cul-de-sac. This thing's turn radius is awful. And so I had to drive the car
Don't you
off
like
the back.
have to have special training for that? Like, isn't that a thing?
Not for U-Haul, no. But I drove a box truck for an appliance store for a while and like did deliveries and stuff. So I'm used to driving a big truck. This is bigger than that one though. And so it was kind of scary, especially on the highway sometimes, because it's like freaking, hard. You got all these blind spots, and I could only go so fast because the tow dolly has like a max speed on it. And so like you're not supposed to go faster than 55, though I definitely went a little faster than that. Because it was like the speed limit was 70. So like for a lot of it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And you only have,
finally
like,
get
one
the
thing
piano
to
here. Had 4 guys. Say what?
I said you only had a piano in it, so.
Right. Yeah. It was just scary driving it, and it took me 4 hours for a 3-hour drive, which sucked. Get it here. Josiah comes over, and then a couple other coworkers, and it was also terrifying kind of moving it. But we put it on a dolly and we're rolling it, and then it doesn't fit through the hallway. And we're like, okay, this is great. So what we have to do, we have to put blankets under it, stand it on its end. There's 2 guys pushing it from the back and 2 guys pulling the blanket that it's on as we maneuver it through the hallway, because it was really the turns. That's what was getting it.
Yeah.
And then once we get to the door, we just kind of tip it back down, and it was glorious. And somehow
now it's
we
here.
came out
You've
with
got
only
it.
one small scratch. It's like an inch. Like, that's it. Well, it was nuts. Took me all day.
Well, congratulations. You have your piano now. After all that stress and all that craziness, you did it. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's very exciting because it's nostalgic too. It's my childhood piano. I've had this thing since I was, I don't know, 10 years old. I started taking lessons. My parents bought it for me, and like it's definitely like my favorite piano. And so it's just like really exciting to have it here. So anyway, that was a lot. But my life is a lot recently.
Yeah.
So how's your life?
I don't know if it was a topic of discussion last time, but my family came down with Omicron. It wasn't that bad. We got through it.
Yeah. I think you did tell me.
Did we mention
maybe?
it? I don't know if it
maybe
happened
not.
yet.
Because this is the second time you've gotten it.
Yes, this is the second time.
Oh man.
So here we are.
Everyone I know is getting it.
Yeah, this most recent one apparently is just like the most infectious, but also it's a lot more mild. So,
well, at first they thought that. Now data is kind of changing.
Oh, well,
And
this might be outdated information. Talk to a doctor. Don't listen to us about
yeah,
coronavirus. Sometimes I forget, like, we're doing a podcast. People are listening to us. But yeah,
yes.
So we got that. We got through it pretty well, though. But then the rest of the family, like outside of us, got it. Fortunately, it was not because of us.
That's good.
We can know that because we kind of isolated and we haven't really been around anyone for a little bit, which on one hand is kind of nice to know they didn't get it from us, but on the other hand, it's like we miss family.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
Yeah, so that happened. I feel like there's something else that's happened. My son is going to be starting to attend his school on Mondays.
Okay.
So that's cool. And my wife, she works at that same school.
Okay.
And she's only going to be teaching on Thursdays and Fridays. So on Monday, our son will be able to be at school and she'll have that opportunity for the first time in forever to just have the newborn and do whatever else she needs to do.
Yeah. Nice.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Josiah, how have you been? Welcome to the call.
I've been pretty all right. Tired apparently because I just turned off my alarm in my sleep this morning.
Don't we all?
But yeah, I guess biggest update. I'm getting my book ready for publishing basically, and by that I mean I'm still a couple years away from publishing, probably, given the timelines that I've been given. But I'm writing a query letter to start sending out to agents. Because
I think I remember you saying that you were getting your test readers in on reading it. How'd that go?
It basically, test readers didn't read it. So I asked my editor, I was like, is this ready to see a publisher? And he was like, yeah, I think it's ready to see like an agent. And I was like, yeah, agent is actually what I asked when I did that. I just said publisher for some reason when I retold the story. But yeah, basically that's how it went. And yeah, so I'm just looking for an agent now, and we'll see how that goes. Pearl, you could not make such gross noises when I'm trying to pet you under the desk. Can you hear her?
I can't, but I also don't have super awesome headphones right now.
I heard a little
is
bit.
She coming through? Pearl?
Yeah, a little bit. That's all right.
She's the worst. She has such a short face, and so she's like, like that. Like,
it's pretty accurate, actually.
Yeah, I know. I've heard it for the past 3 years. It's not even that short of a face, but like Cavaliers do have a short face. Yeah, so they have like a little bit of that problem breathing.
Yeah.
At least she's not a pug, I guess.
True. Hello, listeners. Editor Micha here. Just before we get into the topic today, I wanted to throw out a trigger warning and a couple disclaimers. The first is the trigger warning. We are going to be discussing war, and we are also going to be discussing the Holocaust during parts of our discussion, and we are also going to be talking about different events that happened in 2020, such as the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. So I just wanted to throw that out there. If that is something that is triggering for you, that maybe this is not the right episode to listen to. So before you go any further, maybe think about that for a minute. And then as far as disclaimers, we are not experts, and so do not take what we are saying as people who have done a ton of studies into this. We are just kind of pondering on it, which we do say later in the episode, but I also want to throw it here at the beginning. And I also want to say that we don't agree on this one. Christian and Josiah and I are not all kind of on the same page, but it's kind of hard to see through the conversation, but just know that we do have like the utmost respect for each other and for each other's positions. And in no way are we trying to kind of like belittle each other through this. But we're just discussing it. We're just being honest about our opinions and our positions. And I think it's really cool that we can be honest about that, disagree, and still walk away and be cool with each other. because I think that's how it should be. And so hopefully you all enjoy this conversation. This one doesn't have a lot of resolution, but I think it's a good thing to ponder on. So here we go. Well, anyway, so we are jumping into the topic of war. And I didn't realize we were talking about potential future war. I thought we were just talking about current and past. But
Hey man, there's always a potential future war.
that's fair. That's fair.
It is kind of more of a general war in general kind of thing, but it's kind of relevant because so to fill you in, Micah, there's a lot of tension right now on the border of Ukraine. A lot of talk about Russia invading Ukraine and all the NATO allies like gearing up to defend against that.
Yeah.
So yeah, apparently that's supposed to happen sometime between now and mid-February, whether or not we are at war with Russia.
Oh, wow. That's super fun.
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Well, if my opinions about the current state of affairs across seas is like kind of weird, it's because I actually don't know that much. I just kind of know the basics, and I know some of the problems that are leading to it. But I may also say something uninformed. So Christian, keep me in check if I like have some misinformation or something in my speech.
I also don't know like a lot of the nitty-gritty fine details. I want to remind our listeners that we're talking about things that are beyond we have a very limited scope of knowledge and understanding, and we are discussing the possibilities that limited knowledge and understanding allots us. We're not always going to be talking about things that might we're talking about our perceptions, which might not necessarily line up with reality. And we're going to learn as time goes on. But yeah, don't. This is not a news podcast. Do not come here to learn about the state of the world and affairs and all that kind of stuff. This is hey, this is what we think is going on. Let's talk about it podcast.
Yeah. And I've already said things on this podcast that I disagree with myself about now. So.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
Just through topics. More. It's not important. We can talk about the war thing.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I think I want to throw out the purpose of our podcast is not to be a super well researched and methodical analysis of something. It's called Morning Ponderings for a reason. It's an early morning, you're drinking coffee, sitting on the porch, being like, "Hey, what do you think about this thing?" It's like a casual conversation that we are letting you in on about things that we know a little bit about, and we don't claim to be authorities on, but we're just kind of pondering on them and trying to do so honestly, and I don't know, we're just being humans, So
the way I like to kind of think about it is in the journey to pursue truth, I feel like there's two sides to that coin. There's one side, which is narrowing the possibilities down to a single one, which is the sciences. And then there's another side, which is often neglected because pursuing truth is not all about pursuing answers. Part of it's uncovering possibilities. And I feel like that's kind of where this podcast lies, is we're here to uncover the possibilities that might exist from the position that we're presently in with our knowledge and understanding.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the unique niche that this podcast is.
There you go.
Anyway, war is a thing that's crazy and weird and scary. What's your guys' gut reaction to the concept of war itself? Is it a necessary evil? Is it just a flat out evil? Is it?
It is probably won't surprise you, but it generally, I'm going to maintain this. I am a pacifist. Sometimes armed conflict is necessary. I would generally prefer for there to never be war. I wish that we were evolved enough as a species to figure things out without fighting each other like this. the problems that are creating this conflict with Russia right now could be solved by communism, but they're not, because this is really a kind of a resource thing for Russia. Sometimes war is necessary. I mean, like, if we had just not fought Nazi Germany in World War II, like, how many people would have suffered and died because of, like, sure, you can disagree with like the individual things that we did, like whether or not we should have dropped the nukes, stuff like that, which is unrelated to Nazi Germany. But like allowing them to spread and take over countries and push fascism would have been perpetuating violence through peace. And sometimes being peaceful, I would say with air quotes, but not for our audio audience. Sometimes pushing peace in that manner does actually perpetuate violence. I'm really not a fan of the idea that we would need like a revolution to really upend the government, but I understand that like it's really hard to democratically get rid of certain things. And so like when it comes down to if I were to make a choice between allowing fascism to take over the country or perpetuate human rights or like find a way to get rid of that kind of a government, then revolutionary war also is justified sometimes. So yeah, war can be justified. It just depends on what you're fighting. If not fighting it would perpetuate more violence than fighting it would.
All right.
What are your thoughts, Micha? Although real quick,
I feel like I mostly agree with pretty much everything just that.
I'm actually curious, Josiah, when it comes to the conflict with Russia, I've seen a couple of like TikTok videos, so like nothing super reliable, but about like why it's going on. And it seemed like from everything I saw, it was just politically charged. But then again, the media's historically has been used to manipulate and push pro-war propaganda. So I hadn't heard anything about resources. And if it is a resource thing, what is keeping trade from occurring that would prevent the war?
Well, I can talk about it in a minute. I had planned on doing that.
Okay.
So
Cool.
yeah, I have that stuff locked in my head because I found that discussion very interesting when I learned about it.
Gotcha. So maybe that's something we can talk about towards the end if there's still time.
Because, well, no, I mean, I was just gonna hop into it basically, or not. I mean, just like when I had an opportunity to talk, like that was going to be something that I talked about.
Okay.
But yeah, so yeah, Micah, what was your take?
Yeah, I also would say that I'm a pacifist and I would prefer that there never be war. And especially, I mean, it is tough because a lot of the times, no, I wouldn't say a lot of the times, but there are times, like Josiah said, when there are wars started to basically end a certain kind of violence that basically like is impossible to get rid of without basically fighting it. And as much as I wish that wouldn't happen, the tricky thing is when those wars are started, it ends up being worse than it could have been. like you are fighting the violence, but then you also are potentially killing, like having a lot of collateral damage of killing innocent people and even unintentionally demonizing whole countries of people, depending on what nation you're a part of, like thinking that an entire identity of a nationality basically is like the bad guys. And like that mindset, I think, sticks around for a long time. And I think is like another way of even perpetuating, well, nationalism and racism and like just other different things. And so like, it's a tough one for me because I can just see how much harm war has. And even the lasting effects I think are pretty bad. But at the same time, to let some things continue, to let certain evils exist and spread would be worse. And so it's a sucky thing, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to like my opinion towards it's one of those things where you spend a lot of time wrestling with it, and of course opinions are up for changing in the future, but right now I feel like I am in a position where I'm just about, for two different reasons and under two different circumstances that kind of intertwine, I feel like I'm opposed to all war at this point. For the reasons, I have some reasons that apply, I think, to past wars, and some reasons that apply to future wars and any present and future wars. That being, though I am not naive enough to believe that lunatics don't exist and that they can't come to power, I definitely recognize that there are lunatics in this world, and the lunatics do come to power on occasion. And there are crazy people that if a lunatic were to break into my house and threaten my family, I would defend my family. But I refuse to believe in an army of lunatics, in a nation of lunatics. And I recognize that a lunatic can come to power as a leader and pull the wool over the eyes of a nation to make that nation believe that some other people group, that the other people, the outsiders, are the bad guys, and perpetuate them into this state of war. And then all of a sudden you have this army of civilians turned soldier. And to fight that war is just to kill a bunch of people who have been bamboozled. They've been fooled into believing that their only option is to fight in this bloody war. And when it comes to history, to go up in arms against violent people who think that you are evil and that you are the enemy has only ever perpetuated those thoughts. Like, you might win a war and force a country into surrender, but that mentality, that ideology will persist, and it'll persist for years and years to come, because people have been fed it. They're dying for that very mentality. And so I'm left to wonder, as crazy and as foolish as it seems, if it's more effective and better for humanity in the long run to die trying to die in peaceful protest of the enemy in an attempt to pull the wool off their eyes so they can see that the outside world is actually not a threat to them. They've been fooled into killing people who want nothing to do with hurting them. Is it more effective to do that, which from what we've seen in the past when it comes to fighting racism and fighting nationalism and that sort of thing, it has been effective peaceful protest in dismantling those systems and changing societies. Is it better to do that than it is to die fighting a war? And this is the part that applies to more present wars and future wars, to fight a war that really can't be won. Like, there's no winning this war. It's one of those things where it's like, as soon as it kicks up, the odds of it going nuclear are higher than ever. And you might plunge the rest of the world into, like, you might defeat the enemy, but in doing so, cloud the skies of your country forever in nuclear winter. Can we even win this war? Is it even worth fighting? Is a peaceful protest approach a better option? And so I think that's where I kind of sit at the moment. I don't feel like I can support any wars or any future wars. So I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on that, because there's, of course, that little bit of juxtaposition between us there.
Yeah. I have a few thoughts. This is gonna be a complicated discussion. That'll be fun.
Hey man, that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I definitely would prefer if we could have some sort of peaceful resolution to certain conflicts. I think that something that probably could be talked about is the peaceful response to things like racism in America. If we think about our like how long people have been fighting for equal human rights versus how long they've had them. The last state to legalize interracial marriage was Alabama in 2000, which is within all of our lifetimes. Um, and the voter ratio on that was a very, very slim margin on people saying yes. It was like within 52 and 48%.
Oof.
Now, of course, interracial marriage has been federally legalized since 1967, I think. But that didn't stop people in those states because there were other states like in 1980 something, in 1986 or 7, and then in the 90s, I believe, South Carolina and Mississippi, not sure which one was which, but they both also legalized interracial marriage in that time. And people in those states were using that as an excuse not to marry couples that weren't both the same race. And let's be honest, unless they were both white, they weren't marrying them. Unless you got to, unless you were like a black person, you got a black pastor to do it. And so something to understand about people talking about like revolutionary action, when we talk about the human rights that we've had versus how long we fought for them, gay marriage wasn't legalized until 2015 federally, and we still have people who are extremely homophobic who want to undo that. And actually, with the current Supreme Court that we have, there's a real possibility that could get undone. Trans people and women don't have bodily autonomy yet. Texas rolling that back, and the Supreme Court basically supporting that decision to roll back bodily autonomy on people. Like basically people are very scared, and it's a very real possibility that violence could occur from one party to the next. There is a situation where wool has been pulled over people's eyes for sure, where people have been led to believe that there is some sort of racial conflict. And when I say that, I'm speaking exclusively toward like white people learning that. Black people have a very real experience, and people of color have a very real experience of a racial war against them. White people have been told for some reason that needs to happen, and there's been a lot of fear mongering around that. And wool has been pulled over people's eyes. There is also like, how far can you excuse that? Because that's a pretty messed up opinion to have. And it feels like something that innately as a human you should understand, this is not okay for me. So that in itself is kind of its own discussion. It does relate to like violence and war, and the reason for, and there were some riots last year that were actually started by white nationalists and basically like right-wing terrorists who wanted to make the riots look bad. But there were also riots that were started by people who were just fighting for their rights. And there's a reason for that. It's because they don't feel heard, because people got murdered on camera and other people said, no, they didn't. So that sort of tension is like very real, and it's very valid. And I don't think that I would say that. I mean, I really would hope for nothing revolutionary to happen now, because human rights always get pushed to the back during war. Because when and especially if you engage in something like a civil war, you're not thinking about people's pronouns. You're thinking about where you're going to get your food because the supply chain has been cut off and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Human rights kind of take a back seat and we don't make progress. And that would lead to a scary country where we didn't make enough progress before a new country happened, assuming that like a victory even happened. I don't know. I'm speaking purely theoretically.
Yeah.
And then you end up with less human rights, basically. And you just kind of have another government that's also not great. Maybe like slightly better than the last one, but we didn't make that much progress. And for what?
I feel like what it comes up against is like in war, especially, you get racism and nationalism weaponized as a motivating factor to provoke people to a place where they're willing to literally kill other people because they feel like they have to. They feel like those other people are a threat to them. And I guess really what it boils down to is what is the more effective tool to pick up arms and take life, or to lay down arms and give your life so that other people can realize that you're actually not the threat to them, that they've been deceived, that the people above them are lunatics trying to provoke them into slaughtering other people. And yeah, it gets really complicated. That's I think where a lot of the tension exists, and especially when it comes to like racial tensions and combating racism. Like when we're talking about solutions, like on one hand, if there's not anything violence happening on behalf of the racists, then of course I think we could all agree that a violent solution towards like getting them, I don't know, out of power, or like, I don't know, a violent solution might not be the best. But if they are instigating violence, then it really boils down to this question of like, okay, here's a mob of people who are instigating violence. If we fight them and we return violence for violence, we're just perpetuating the things that they already believe about us. Whereas if we protest them in a peaceful way, if we lay down and risk our lives to break through to them, then we're given this opportunity, we're given this chance that they can see the stark contrast between their hate and their enemies' love for them. And that has in the past broken through to people. That has shown to be effective. And it's this weird thing of like, how do we ask people to love their enemies enough to die out of a desperate attempt to help them to see reason? And it's like, I don't know, man. It's a really complicated thing. I honestly think that is the route that I would take. I can't say that I would expect other people to take it. And I totally understand why other people wouldn't, and why. So I'm not, I guess it's important for me to say that I'm not saying that my opinion, my perspective is superior. I'm not saying that it is right. I'm speaking mostly for myself, and I'm not saying other people should agree with me, but I feel like that's where I reside.
So one thing that I learned that kind of happened in Nazi Germany is that they started to notice that their soldiers and were kind of, it was getting very emotionally taxing for them to just simply murder people all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And their drinking problem went up exponentially. And so they were like, how do we solve this problem? So what they did is they started to separate out the process of murdering people. Basically, it's like, okay, so a certain group of people would, load people up into trains, right, to move them. And it's like, that was their only job. So like that was the only part of the process they saw. It almost became like, think of like in a factory, like an assembly line. It's like you put one part on a car and then you do that. And that's the only thing you do. So you never see the car. You just see that one part that you're putting together. And so one person then, presses one button, and like they never see, basically they separate them from the process of murdering to where they don't even understand most of the time, or at least fully, what they're doing. And that allows them to basically bypass people's empathy.
Yeah, to be ignorantly compliant.
Exactly. And sadly, I think that kind of methodology basically can be very easily replicated, and I think probably is, which I think makes this very difficult when talking about how do you stop certain evils, because if you separate people from the act itself, then any kind of self-sacrifice will go unnoticed. You're just a number. You're not even a person that they're killing. Like, they don't even know. And so I think that's my struggle. Like I hear what you're saying, and I think ideally I would like that as well.
Yeah, and let me respond to that real quick in that, like, in that instance, like, of course, it's down that line, at the very end, there's going to be somebody who has to pull the trigger, unless they're doing it with robots, in which case, I mean, let's fight the machines. But somebody's pulling that trigger, and it's that person that we got to break through to. And because I mean, we can't just, the solution isn't, oh, let's kill the person who's loading people up on the trains, because that's not going to accomplish anything. And if anything, that's just going to perpetuate any propaganda that's been fed to these people about how evil and crazy the Americans are, just killing people, loading people on trains. So I hear you. And I think those are kind of my thoughts regarding that sort of systemic desensitization.
Sure.
Honestly, sometimes it's just like hard. So as an example, there was a guy last year named Ahmaud Arbery. I'm just forgetting what year it is. It was 2020 that this happened. Ahmaud Arbery. Do you guys know Ahmaud Arbery?
He was the black guy running through a neighborhood.
So, like, really briefly, he was out for a jog. A couple of white guys thought that he was this guy that was like walking around, first of all, not harming anything. There was a guy that they had on video that was like walking around houses that were still under construction, but none of the videos ever showed him touching anything. He just was like in there out of curiosity, I guess. And no property was ever reported damaged or anything like that as a result of him being around. It just made people uncomfy, because this is the deep south that I'm about to talk about. And they chased him down and they murdered him, just like on camera. He tried to defend himself by pulling away their gun, and then they shot him. And yeah, they had no remorse over that. And the local county, the county sheriff office, the county DA did not want to prosecute them. And that was like from the bottom up to the top of the local authority that was just like, no, this is fine. So sometimes it can be really hard to see the idea of like getting people like that to see the point, you know, because this is just respecting that another human has the right to live. If somebody's gone to the point that they're willing to just murder another human, like, and that's the America that we live in. If we're talking about like not war, but like American violence against POC. Yes. We're talking about like police officers who just pulled the trigger on somebody because they didn't think that their life was as valuable as somebody else's. Not because the trigger pull was needed, not because it was like, it's not the decision of like, you're threatening somebody else, so now your life has less value than somebody else's. It's just, I don't feel like dealing with you, so I pull the trigger. And it's not just them, it also stems into ableism. Like, there was a lady that got harassed by police officers. She had Alzheimer's, so she didn't know where she was, and they like assaulted her. She was like in her 80s or something like that. And like it's just insane, the kind of violence that occurs against people in the modern day. It's just like that sort of stuff happens all the time, and innocent people. I've seen men get on their knees, put their hands in the air, try to be peaceful about it, and still get killed by somebody who was involved in that whole process. And I don't know how a peaceful resolution breaks through to that kind of person. I mean, it's really hard to conceive of one that does.
I feel like that goes back to what I said earlier about like I'm not so ignorant as to say that lunatics don't exist. There are people who are totally amoral lunatics that are out there and they work their way into positions of power. And I think we should totally oppose those people. But specifically when it comes to war, I refuse to believe that the majority of people are lunatics, especially when it comes to mass numbers of soldiers just being thrown into this meat grinder of war.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
If you
so
want
I'm
to
just
talk
gonna
about the Russia conflict, we can do that too.
I was just going to respond to that. My wife is needing me. So I'll leave with one last thing, and then I'll leave you guys to finish out the conversation. I'll have to listen to it later. Wish I could continue to partake, but I need to go help her out.
Yeah.
What it I think comes to for me, especially when it comes to modern wars, even though I feel like I'm pretty much oppose all wars, even past, present, future, but especially with modern wars, I would rather die in peaceful protest of the enemy at the very slim chance that it results in peace than I would fight and kill for a very wide possibility of mutual annihilation. And so that's kind of where I'm at when it comes to that general thing. And so I'm curious, you guys have given me your thoughts, and it's not necessarily this isn't a show where necessarily we all have to agree, and where our listeners have to agree, and our opinions are viable to change. So
Definitely.
I'm curious to hear out the rest of your guys' conversation, but I've probably got to go.
Me and Micha literally had a versus episode, so
kind of. All right. Well, see you, Christian.
Yeah,
see you guys.
So
where were we in the discussion? Did you want to talk about anything specifically related to that discussion?
Yeah, I kind of did. My question that I didn't ask, but like he somewhat answered, but I guess I wanted to ask it a little more directly. And this is what like sticks in my mind is like, for example, in the American Civil War, would the South ever freed the slaves unless we basically forced them to?
No.
Yeah, I think the answer is no.
Yeah, because if you look at those states that were denying the interracial marriage, they were all the southern states that were like opposing the North, basically.
Yeah,
and not all, as in like there were some that were like strong armed in because of the whole the divide. I forgot what the line was, the 38th or whatever.
Yeah.
There were some of them that were like that, but the ones that like instigated the war, like they were like, no, we don't want people of different colors getting together. That opposes our Nazi views.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, I feel his sentiment. I hate war, and I hate that it I don't want to say has to be this way, because I wish it didn't. And I hope that humanity evolves at some point to get to a place where we do not have to kill each other in order to stop certain evils from continuing to destroy people's lives. But I think like that's just one example of many that I can see that like I don't think they ever would have stopped. And like that, I mean, in some ways that violence against people of color has not stopped. It was just changed. It's like definitely better than like being enslaved, but
we can say yes that things are better today than they were 200 years ago.
Yeah, they are. But like I don't think there was a peaceful way to do that. Like slave owners were just, murdering their slaves, and like they're, it's not for just existing, like, and it's like I don't know. I don't think there's always a peaceful solution, sadly. I really wish there was. But in that case, like I think slavery would still exist if there was not a war.
We might have to do a parte dos on this war topic.
We might.
But because I think once we get more into international wars, I think that there might also be a complicated. We're just talking about like domestic, because I brought up revolutions because I'm a communist. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're explicitly like we've been trying to get into the international space, but we're still talking about domestic stuff right now,
Yeah,
like Revolutionary War and stuff. Yeah, no, it's yeah. Did you hear that?
a little bit.
Okay, it was Pearl. She's barking at me because I'm not giving her attention right now.
Oh my gosh.
Um. Anyway, yeah, it is a situation where I wish that we could all just grow up.
Yeah.
You know, we can't, apparently. I can grow up, but I can't force somebody else to grow up, another whole adult that isn't in my space.
Yeah.
But their inability to grow up, I don't think cancels out somebody else's need to have civil rights. And so that's where I kind of come into wanting, just wanting to find some way to free people who are currently enslaved to the system, because we haven't even gotten into, if this is like a race episode, we haven't even gotten into like the prison industrial complex and how it
Yeah.
literally has just enslaved black people again.
Yeah.
Literally has them picking cotton in a lot of states for free, like just given to plantation owners, and just slung us back to the 1800s basically.
Yeah.
And how horrible, I mean, that stuff is awful that exists. And like really yeah, so many concepts go into that, like the fact that white people don't exist. That was a concept that was created in, if you
Mm.
can guess the year, about
Oh boy.
400 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was created in order to oppress black people.
Yeah.
Before then, you didn't identify by the color of your skin, you identified by your country.
Yeah.
So, and that's why Italians are like the super socially progressive fascists in World War II, because they were just like, if you're Italian, you're Italian. I don't care what your skin color is, you're Italian. If you're
Yeah.
not Italian, we're fascist against you. But Italians are Italians.
Oh my gosh.
That was actually how people identified for almost all of human history.
Yeah.
Sure, skin color played a part in some people
Sure.
enslaving others, like you look different than me, but it was still about it being from a different country. It wasn't white versus black until very recently, and it was something created by white people. It's something that would be very difficult to end as a concept in people's minds, but I think that our generation is trying to get there.
Yeah.
It's just hard to say, like, we have to wait for the boomer generation to basically go away before we can have human rights. But honestly, that's how it feels sometimes.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so
sadly.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. One thing you said that brought to mind something else I was gonna say, which I think this is I think what makes it hard and sucky, is that you just saying like they just need to grow up, is like the whole idea of peaceful change is that it's a two-way street. It has to be a two-way street. Um, and if
Yeah.
only one side is actually like working towards progress and the other side refuses to, and continues to refuse to, then there is no peace. Like it's impossible. And so like as much as I might try to resolve things peacefully, if the other person refuses to do that, then like I can't change that person really. Like I can
Yeah.
try. And once again, like I can try everything. Um and there's a lot of people who have and who feel like they've tried everything. And that's why people of color often talk about like how they're just tired. Like they're tired of trying to educate people. They're tired of trying to like be I hate to like say like palatable to white people, but like um
No, that's
what
you're correct. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
like
probably how they feel, and that's
it is how they
um
feel.
yeah,
And
that
like
that is correct. That's a good assessment.
and it's because it has to be a two-way street, and very often one side refuses to walk that street.
Yeah.
And when you do that, like it's another way that oppression continues, is like, even in the attempt of peace, like there is so much um even more exhaustion and that goes into trying to do things peacefully. Not that it's not a worthy thing to pursue, but at some point it I don't know, it gets really difficult to like say
Yeah.
if it's worth it, if it's like, if no change for hundreds of years, what do you do?
Right. Because, I mean, we literally have a system that's trying to revert us back to as
Yeah.
early as possible. We literally have a party in this country that is centered on the idea of bringing us back to the origins of our country, which is not someplace that we want to be. We want
No.
to move forward. That is a significant portion of representation in our government. And the other portion of representation in our government is not that great either.
No.
They're pretty ideologically divided. You have some people that have much better opinions than others. But one of the problems with Democrats is that they are so divided on their ideology that they can't join together to do anything. That's why I just laugh at any, like, the left is trying to do this, like leftist conspiracies. Like, right wingers are the only people that can do a conspiracy because they're the only people that have a consistent ideology. Democrats, like, if you look at the opinions of people in the House, you have Democrats who are basically Republicans that
Yeah.
are blue.
Yeah.
And then you have well, Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat, he's an independent, because there's no socialist party in America and he's a socialist.
Yeah.
um I would say, like, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is probably the closest to having a socialist aside from him. And then you have people like kind of all throughout the middle, but almost always with generally conservative leaning opinions. And if you think about it, most of the people in the government have been around long enough to have voted against the Civil Rights Act.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them did.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
you have people who were alive for Jim Crow era laws.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, like Biden was, I think. He's a pretty old dude, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what his opinion was at the time because he is pretty conservative for a Democrat.
Yeah.
Um, and so part of the problem that some people see is that we have Supreme Court justices that were around for that, and probably, in most of them on that Supreme Court, probably held the racist opinion at the time and probably still hold that racist opinion. It's just, it almost like there's an age limit for like when you can be a president. It almost feels like there should be an age limit for when you can be in government too. Like, you should cap out at like 60 or something like that,
Yeah. It's like
because your views from 60 years ago are not relevant to today.
yeah. Well, that's
Um,
assuming that, I mean, that's assuming that they don't continue to learn and grow as they get older.
yeah.
I mean,
No, yeah. I mean,
I
some people do. Like, Bernie Sanders also was around for the civil rights movement, but
yeah.
he was in the protest crowd with a gun. That was Bernie Sanders.
Oh my gosh.
He was packing at protests because he was worried about the police assaulting people.
Dang.
He yeah, no, he
Wow.
yeah. Like, you can complain about him being a politician and having like four houses or whatever, but like, he actually has been in the trenches with people,
Yeah.
and that's why people love Bernie. That's why we love Mitten Man. Um he was there for it,
Oh
and
man.
he is a good person. Um
Yeah.
but yeah.
So, so war.
Yeah, war. Sorry, I went on my little tangent there.
You turn into a
You
little
want to talk
political
about the
rant.
Russia Ukraine thing?
Um, yeah, let's do that real quick. Let's try not to go too long,
Sure,
but
yeah.
yeah. So
Um
current events.
so, like, basically Russia is like, uh as far as recent moves that they've made, I don't know. I know that they have been training basically at the border. The Ukraine conflict has been going on for years, with Russia attempting to occupy, America kicking them out. The thing that I mentioned earlier when Christian was in here that maybe we can talk about next time, we can do like another war thing, except span it into international stuff. Um, But Russia essentially is the largest country on Earth and also has very limited resources. It's like living in Antarctica and being like, I have a whole continent to myself. Except they have slightly more resources because it's not all frozen tundra,
Yeah.
but a lot of it is. And they actually don't have a lot. They also only have one port to the sea that is not frozen during the winter.
Wow.
They used to have another place to ship through the Mediterranean, but NATO basically kicked them out when there were some shifts in power.
Mm.
And they were like, we don't like you, Russia. And they kicked them out because it's acceptable to hate Russia. Something to understand, this is not pro-Russian propaganda. I'm not a tanky that believes that everything Stalin did was right and stuff like that. But the people in Russia still deserve their food.
Yeah.
I may not like Vladimir Putin, but that doesn't mean that Russia itself needs to be screwed over by things that the West does.
Yeah.
And so there probably is a degree to which there could be some sort of peaceful solution here. It just would involve politicians releasing a little bit of power, which, if we know politicians, is like trying to get Pearl to stop barking while she's in her crate. It's impossible, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I say, like, I wish we could grow up, and that's one of my big opinions, but that's kind of what's going on with that.
So Russia is invading, or no, sorry, potentially looking to invade because of resources.
Yeah, there's definitely that. There could be a degree to which Vladimir Putin just wants more power.
Yeah.
He's a pretty power hungry guy. But yeah, there's definitely a argument that, like, they don't have natural defenses really, other than just being in a place that sucks to live in. If they got
Yeah.
invaded at their borders, they would have numbers, and that's about it.
Yeah.
They don't have any sort of natural defenses like the US. If we needed to, we could move, like, if we were in like all out war, we could move back past like the Smoky Mountains or whatever on the East Coast and use the natural defenses there to like hold a line.
Yeah.
Like, we have that sort of geography here, that like we have places that we can hold a line and keep a pretty stable nation or whatever. And a lot
Yeah.
of countries have that. Like, England has water all around it. Launching an invasion on England is really difficult.
Hmm.
And honestly, this is all thinking in terms of war, like how well can I defend myself against war? But Russia's been a nation that's been involved in a lot of conflict,
Hmm.
and it's still on their minds a lot. And we still have Russia on our mind as a country to like be in conflict with. Like, if you think about like the typical action movie, it's very common to just have like the Russians be the bad guys.
Yeah.
That comes from like Cold War fears. But yeah.
Yeah. Now,
You don't have to talk specifically about Russia, but I've been talking a lot. So like, what are your kind of thoughts on international war in general?
it's, I don't know. It's interesting. I think the US is a strange country in the sense that we have like a military base in like every country, and like other countries don't. Like, there's not a a military base from Australia in America, like that's not a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But we seem to have military bases everywhere else, which is like weird if you think, like, if you were to like sit back and think like, what if like um another country had a military base like in, I don't know, wherever you live. That would be pretty strange, right? Like, just this
Yeah.
other country just has like this, ridiculous amount of like resources and money that can just be thrown into like putting an actual military base in your like area. And it's like, that's kind of weird to think about. And I think that that is like an extension of American imperialism, obviously. And like
Yeah.
how we haven't conquered these places, but we keep them in check, quote unquote. And
We have like a chokehold on the world.
basically, yeah. And like if they do something that limits our resources because we are very greedy, then we will, we can do something about that because we've already got a military base there. Like it's kind of ridiculous. I don't know. I think it's international war. That's like that's just like a whole other topic. Like I don't know how to even start talking about international war.
How many foreign bases do you think Russia has? Just like give me a number.
Foreign?
Yeah. Like how America has like 800 or whatever. Like how many do you think Russia has?
They probably have like 3.
2.
They have 2.
Really
okay.
Close. How many do you think China has?
I have probably 5.
1.
Really?
They have 1, yeah.
Wow.
So when we talk about like, it's just, it's wild. There's a reason that other countries care so much about American elections. But then Vladimir Putin gets elected again and everybody's like, oh, that was going to happen.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff is wild. Yeah, when it comes to international war, it's so complicated. I think that in our current case, honestly, like, I'm at a point where I'm like, I don't think there's an excuse for war anymore. So like I want to side with Christian on some of these things.
Yeah.
I just think that there are occasionally things that like you have to go to war against them because for some reason some lunatic has convinced a bunch of people to kill a bunch of other people, and wool over the eyes or not, people are dying, and there's not necessarily a solution that stops people from dying and also doesn't involve killing other people. And I'm curious because I hate when human life is lost in general. Like anybody dying, I don't like that, and that's why I hold the views that I do. But
I'm curious. Maybe we'll see. I guess if we'll talk about this again or if we'll choose a different topic. But I'm curious to hear. Like he said that sometimes this kind of peaceful way of going about it has worked, and I'm curious to know when, because honestly, I've not really learned about many times where that's actually kind of done something. And so, but he talked about it. So
even like the Christmas truce in World War I, when a bunch of just like unorganized military camps between Allied and not Allied, it wasn't the Allied and the Axis, but basically between one side and the other, they like on Christmas decided to just be humans to each other. And then they had to go back to killing each other the next day because the people in power said so. I do despise politicians deciding to play games with people's lives just because they get to hold the chess pieces and other people get to be the chess pieces. That's pretty disgusting.
I agree.
War in general is, but I still hold the opinions that I do, but
definitely. So there's a lot to think about. So
and there is a lot of nuclear fear right now. I get that. There's the concept of nuclear deterrence, which literally can't be tested because that would require a control group where somebody launches nukes. No, we don't have that. But there is a legitimate fear that somebody will say we've gotten desperate enough now that we're going to launch a nuke, and then that turns into the extinction of humanity and probably most animal and plant life on Earth as well.
Wonderful.
So,
love it. Well, our thing's about to run out of time, so I think we should just wrap up.
Sure.
I guess.
Yeah, we could wrap it up here. Maybe we'll talk about it again sometime.
But
this one's probably a more inconclusive episode than we usually come out with, but
very inconclusive. We're just, we're just thinking, we're just talking about it, and we've promised part 2s for other things in the past and not always done them. So we'll see what we talk about next. But anyway, you can, if you want to find us, you can find me at Pondering Together on TikTok. That's really my main thing. Josiah?
You can find me at Something Matters on TikTok. Not normally talking about revolutions, but today we did.
For anybody, you can catch me on Truth Voyager At TikTok, it's private accounts, but you can still ask me if you want to follow, and I usually accept. You can also find me here, and I have a video game on the App Store called Zombie 2,
Which I have played
maybe I will. Yeah, you have played it,
Yeah.
and I got a little bit of your feedback on it. It's cool, but yeah, I might make updates to that in the future. Who knows if I can find the motivation to do that. Don't forget, there's a support link in the description of the video. And also you can comment and leave comments on YouTube, which I'm trying to upload the last episode to YouTube still. So sorry, that's not done yet.
All right. Thank you all for listening, and excited for all these new topics that we're going to get in the new year. So we will talk to y'all later, and have a wonderful day.
All right. See you guys.
Cool.
See ya.
See ya.
Okay, now the moment we've all been waiting for. Is his app one of those where you like have to pull the pin, but the solution is really obvious, but for some reason you pull the wrong pin anyway?
No.
Okay.
No, it's like a little animated zombie fighting game.
Oh, okay, cool. That's
where
cool.
you like it is kind of fun. You have to like, you're in a house, and there's like different levels. But the first one you can do is you're in a house, and you can like move furniture around to like block off entrances, and then like you get different guns you can pick up throughout the game, and like they get better as time goes on, but also the zombies get stronger and there's more of them, and they like eat through the walls and like eat through the stuff so eventually, if you get far enough, which he just like sent me a video of him playing it where he was like way farther than I ever got. There were like no walls left. They had eaten every single wall. It was just running out in the open.
That's funny.
Anyway, yeah, y'all should check it out. It's fun.
Yeah.